This message comes from Capital One. With the Spark Cash Plus card, you earn unlimited 2% cash back on every purchase for your business. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus. Terms apply.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. This week, we are connecting the dots between sports cars, the Great Recession, and crashing out. I know. How are all of these things connected? Well, we're going to find out with Alex Abad-Santos, senior correspondent at Vox, and Sarah Shrigley, research associate at the Population Reference Bureau. Alex, Sarah, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you're both millennials, as am I. What does a millennial midlife crisis look like to you? Like, have you had one or know people that have had one?
Does going back to school count? Because I feel like everyone that I know's midlife crisis involves some degree of a career shift or going back to school.
Yeah, I think that counts. Alex, you recently wrote a piece in Vox about the millennial midlife crisis. What does that look like in your life?
Brittany, do you even know how many DJs and wannabe DJs and comedians are in my life right now?
The improv classes are full. Yeah, I will say I haven't quite hit my midlife crisis, but there's still time. And like me, a lot of millennials are about to hit 40 or are already in their 40s. So we might be seeing more of them. It's funny, even as we enter midlife, I feel like millennials still haven't shaken some of the stink off of being considered entitled. Like in the 2010s, as millennials were mostly in their 20s, the news media was flooded with disparaging think pieces to that effect. Millennials were the generation of participation trophies, the me generation, the generation who couldn't buy a house because they were stupid enough to spend all their money on avocado toast. While some intergenerational razzing is to be expected, I mean, we see it on social media every day, millennials can be forgiven for being salty about it because we were raised by the people who gave us the participation trophies in the first place. And many of us were launched into a deeply hostile economic environment as we came of age. It's been about a decade or more since all of this happened. So I want to know, how are millennials faring now? How do our lives look different from our parents?
A midlife crisis for millennials does look different from what I've seen in terms of being less about sort of upending this really stable life, because for many millennials, life has never been stable, and more about trying to find something that feels stable and sustainable for you moving forward.
Yes. At least for me, I'm very much still trying to get things together.
So the first thing I think it's important to acknowledge is that even just talking about generational labels, as you said, there's some razzing, and it can be kind of controversial because people get a little bit up in arms that we're assuming that everybody's got the same experience just because they're the same age. And obviously that's not true.
Right.
Really what it's more about is understanding that groups of people hit certain life stages around major cultural or societal events. So for millennials, it's things like the Great Recession and right around the time that we were entering the workforce or finishing high school and college. But that being said, that we do know some things are generally true of millennials as a group and differ from previous generations. So millennials are more educated than past generations were at the same age. And median income has increased for millennials. So sometimes people point to that and say, see, millennials are making so much more money than I made when I was their age. Income hasn't really kept up with how expensive things are. It's really neutralized the benefits of that higher salary. The number may be higher, but the buying power isn't. And with that higher level of education, it's not always translating to high-paying employment. So we got all this advice as millennials about going to college, working hard, getting a job out of college, and that was sort of the ticket to success. And that's the model that previous generations had success with. So that's the advice they gave. But with how expensive college has become, previous generations didn't see student debt the way that millennials are. And so there's a lot of things you can point to and say millennials are doing so much better. They're more educated. They make more money. But when you look at the whole cultural context, that education and that higher income isn't resulting in the same yields as it did for past generations.
And there's also, at the same time, there's like a lot of cultural things happening. Millennials are like the generation where it's like, okay, take a gap year. Think about your mental health. Think about all this stuff. that's like going on aside from like your financials and what your career is. There's a whole like more holistic view where it's like, okay, well, we've had a little bit more freedom, but it's also like the milestones weren't really hitting. I think the crisis is more like, oh my God, can I buy a house? It's not like, oh my God, can I sell my house and get a new girlfriend, right? Like we're still on step one.
We're still on step one. So we're like, our lives aren't falling apart because they haven't come together. Am I going to get it together in the next 40? I didn't get it the first 40. Like, can we hit it in the next 40?
Let's run it back.
Let's run it back. You know, there are some reasons to believe that millennials are doing fine. Millennials' median net worth is higher than baby boomers at the same age. We're more educated than previous generations, as you mentioned, Sarah. And one survey from CNBC found that 78% of older millennials say they are satisfied with their lives. I want to meet these people. But there are other reasons to believe a lot of us are struggling. Like, even though the median net worth of millennials is higher, as you mentioned, it's not just also that we don't have the same purchasing power. Our generation is also more unequal than previous generations. Rich millennials are super rich, like think tech workers, and poor millennials are definitely worse off than previous generations. I found one stat that really shocked me. 63% of boomers, so most boomers that were service workers, not requiring specialized skills, own their own home at 35, compared with 42% of millennials in the same jobs. It seems like it's harder to get out of poverty as a millennial than it was as a boomer, and we have more debt. More generally, we have lower rates of marriage and homeownership than our parents at the same age. And I think a lot of us just don't have the things maybe we thought we'd have by midlife. Like, how does all that factor into the millennial midlife crisis?
One of the funny things that I kept running into when I wrote my article was that like millennials and experts both came to this like mantra or credo that was like, we are broke, but we have therapy. And it's like, of course, that's going to make a midlife crisis look a little different. And I think like one of the things that kept coming up was like a lot of people saw it as like an empowerment or an opportunity versus something that you blow up. Instead of blowing up your life with a sports car and a younger girlfriend, boyfriend, it's more like, okay, well, maybe this like fitness journey will make me feel better, or maybe learning how to DJ or learning how to tell jokes to people will make me feel better about the next segment of my life. It's all about like anxiety and fear and like how we cope with it. And I think like because the language we have now and we're more fluent in like mental health, of course it's going to affect like how we think about our later in life adulthood.
So I think it does get back to that not having hit the stability that previous generations achieved and also aimed for. There's a few factors. I think there's less of a monoculture now of like everyone kind of having the same general goals. There is more variation in what people aspire for their life to look like. You know, millennials marry later. They may not marry at all. They may choose not to have children. So the goal of having a house and a white picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog may not be the goal for everybody.
Yeah.
So what arriving looks like differs. But I think also getting out of poverty and increasing your financial well-being as a millennial is hard because in many cases, the way to do that is to switch employers, to find a new job. And so we're not having that experience of finishing whatever level of education you're going to get, whether it's high school or college or beyond, and then settling into one job, staying with that job, getting promoted, retiring from that job, or maybe ever retiring. And instead, we're kind of every few years switching jobs, finding a new employer. And so there's that lack of stability and never really feeling that like settled in feeling for millennials that previous generations were able to. And so uprooting it is kind of a funny thought, I think, because what are you uprooting? You're kind of always reinventing as a millennial. You're always changing and shifting and pivoting. It's sort of what we've become good at because we've had all of these big events happen during our early adulthood.
Both of your points in this conversation, it really makes me think that like the millennial midlife crisis is kind of less about trying to forge a new path so much as like trying to like achieve some sort of like sense of inner peace or like emotional fulfillment, whether that's through grad school or fulfilling relationship or getting a pet or running a marathon or whatever, or like really trying to be like, okay, like how am I practically going to survive the next 40 years without the same social structures that previous generations were able to rely upon? If I never own a home, if I can't retire until I'm 72, if I don't have children that I assume will take care of me in 3 decades. Yeah, it's a lot of like redefinition and readjusting. I wonder, like, how should we be rethinking the usual life milestones to that end? How do you all think we should be rethinking them?
So I spoke to a researcher at the University of Buffalo named Holland Reicher, and she studies later in life adulthood. And she was actually explaining to me this idea of looking at your life as this big narrative and this ongoing story you're writing, and like all these things that are happening to you, and like evaluating like, oh yeah, this is just part of my bigger story, and thinking about midlife as like an opportunity actually results in healthier later in life adults.
What?
Having a realistic assessment of like, okay, maybe I'm not making $100 million the way I thought I would, but being like, okay, well, this is where I want to be in 5 years, and thinking about these opportunities is actually pretty healthy. Not to get woo-woo, but thinking of life as this giant story is actually makes for healthier later in life adults.
I kind of love that. I really love that.
As bad as like the hands that we've been dealt as millennials, like financially, and like feeling kind of like we aren't getting the same things and we're a little bit stunted, like thinking of life as like this beautiful opportunity is actually kind of hopeful.
Oh my gosh. Alex, Sarah, I have learned so much here. And as a thank you, I'd like to teach you something by playing a game. Can you stick around for a tiny bit longer?
Absolutely.
Let's go.
We'll be right back with a little game I like to call, But Did You Know?
This message comes from Capital One. With the Spark Cash Plus card from Capital One, you earn unlimited 2% cash back on every purchase and get big purchasing power so your business can spend more and earn more. Stephen, Brandon, and Bruno, the business owners of SandCloud, reinvested their 2% cash back to help build the company's retail presence. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Find out more at CapitalOne.com/SparkCashPlus. Terms apply.
This message comes from Sattva. Everyone has a unique skill or ability. It just needs to be discovered, then nurtured. One way to foster that is getting quality sleep, which can improve athletic abilities, increase energy, and boost memory and learning. Every Sattva mattress is designed to promote that kind of sleep. In fact, Sattva was named Best Luxury Mattress by SleepFoundation.org. And now, save $200 on $1,000 or more at sattva.com/NPR.
This message comes from Schwab. Everyone has moments when they could have done better, like cutting their own hair or forgetting sunscreen, so now you look like a tomato. Same goes for where you invest. Level up and invest smarter with Schwab. Get market insights, education, and human help when you need it. Learn more at schwab.com.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile took what's wrong with wireless and made it right. They offer premium wireless plans for less, and all plans include high-speed data, unlimited talk and text, and nationwide coverage. See for yourself at mintmobile.com/switch.
All right. We're going to play a little game I like to call, But Did You Know? Here's how it works. I'm going to share some trivia about a very relevant topic. But don't worry, it's all multiple choice. The right answer is in there somewhere. And the first person to blurt out the right answer gets a point. Person with the most points wins, unless I change my mind partway through the game and I throw in like another way of measuring who wins. And the winner's prize is bragging rights. Are y'all ready?
Woo! So ready.
Okay. The game's theme is Millennial Moments. So we're going to learn some fun facts about some of the cultural touchstones from our youth. Okay, first question. The dance style known as crumping came about in the 90s and 2000s. And it was kind of everywhere. It's this very energetic, expressive dance with lots of sharp movements, very percussive, kind of born out of hip hop. But this style was also born from a different type of performance too. Was it A, miming, B, clowning, or C, puppetry?
I'm going to guess clowning.
Miming.
Okay. Well, Sarah, lucky you.
Whoa.
The answer is B, clowning. The birth of crumping is associated with Tommy the Clown, a clown working in Los Angeles at the time who started bringing hip-hop dance into his routines to zhuzh up his act for kids' parties. And his style of dance kind of caught on with the kids watching him. So there you go.
I didn't even know clowning was like a verb like that. I've been clowned.
You've been...
I didn't know that one could perform clowning.
A, another option possibly for the midlife crisis.
I actually know someone who did that. So
Yes, I have a friend who also got into clowning and honestly loved it. All right, next question, next millennial moment. Jenkos were really big, cartoonishly wide jeans that were super popular in the 90s. But what does Jenko, spelled J-N-C-O, actually stand for? Is it A, Jean Nirvana Company, B, Jeans and Crunkin' Out, or C, Judge None, choose one?
I would say C,
I think C.
because that sounds the most millennial.
It does.
I'll tell you what, you're both right, but Alex got the point because he was first. The answer is C. Woo. Judge none, choose one. The brand actually closed its doors in 2018, but they launched back up after those darn TikTokers started making them cool again. So if you had your eyes on some Jinkos, if you didn't get to get Jinkos back in middle school, like some people, you still got a chance.
I had Jinkos.
You had Jinkos, Sarah?
They're terrible for a Michigan winter, but I wore them anyway.
Oh my gosh, one of my best friends from middle school, she swore by some Jinkos and the bottom of her pants was always wet.
Yes.
Soggy.
Soggy. But that was a big problem with the boot cut and flared jeans in general. We were all going through it. Mm-hmm. Okay, last question. I gotta shout out to my girl, Ms. Four Loko. Oof. Four Lokos were staples of the millennial college party scene. They were also a staple of my diet in 2008. I used to pregame with Four Loko because I didn't know better. But do you know about how many standard drinks are in its most alcoholic cans? Is the answer A, 3 standard drinks per can, B, 4 standard drinks per can, or C, 5 standard drinks per can?
I'm going to go with 3.
I'm going to go with 5 just because it sounds absolutely wild.
Well, I'll tell you what, wild but true. The answer is C. Actually, closer to 5.5.
How did anyone survive?
I don't know how I survived. I used to drink Four Loko mixed with Franzia Chillable Red, like the wine that came in the bag, in the box. Yeah. Four Lokos also used to include caffeine, which is actually the thing that made them kind of dangerous. Caffeine can make you feel less drunk, leading you to drink more. But they removed the caffeine in 2010. All right, well, that's it for But Did You Know for this week. Congratulations to Alex on your win. And Sarah, Alex, thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
That was Alex Abad-Santos, Senior Correspondent at Vox, and Sarah Shrigley, Research Associate at the Population Reference Bureau. And I'm going to put on my influencer hat for a second and ask you to please subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening. Click follow so you know the latest in culture while it's still hot. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Liam McBain.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patuk.
Engineering support came from
Becky Brown.
Our supervising producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Mint Mobile. If you're tired of spending hundreds on big wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks, Mint Mobile might be right for you with plans starting from $15 a month. Shop plans today at mintmobile.com/switch. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
This message comes from LinkedIn Ads. Target your buyers by job title, company, role, and skills with LinkedIn Ads. All the professionals you need to reach in one place. Get a $100 credit on your next campaign at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.